Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, How to Scale Digital App Testing with Jenkins and Automation You Can Trust. Before we begin, I'd like to cover 3 housekeeping items for our viewers. First, at the bottom of your audience console, you'll find a number of widgets for questions and additional resources. When you have questions for the presenter during the webcast, click on the Q&A widget and submit your question. We will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the webcast, and if we run out of time, we'll get back to you via email. Second, if you need any tech support during the webinar, please use the help option. Third and finally, a copy of today's slide deck is available in the resources section at the bottom of your screen. We will also email you a link to the recording of this webinar within the next few hours. With that, I'll introduce our presenters for today's broadcast, Johnny Lamb, Lead Global Sales Engineer, and Eran Kinsberner, Chief Evangelist, Product Manager, and Author here at Perfecto by Perforce. Johnny, Eran, thanks for joining us on today's broadcast.
Thank you, Shelby.
Thanks for having us, Shelby.
Let's start with you, Johnny, if you want to just briefly introduce yourself.
Thank you, Eran. Happy to join the call today. And I've been with Perfecto for quite a few years, being part of the global sales engineering team for about 4 years now. My background is really in automation engineering. So prior to joining Perfecto, I've been working at various companies and looking at various things in automation. So happy to talk about the webinar today along with Eran Kinsberg, and pass it to you, Eran. I know you've done a lot of things in this automation space as well.
Oh, yeah, Johnny. Thank you. So, yeah, as mentioned by Shelby, I am a Chief Evangelist, part of the product management at Perfecto, author of these 3 books, one of which was just released to the market, Accelerating Software Quality, available via blogs, Twitter, and other social media. And excited to be here and talk to you about this really cool topic of how you can actually build a test automation strategy that you can trust and embed into your CI/CD pipeline. We will focus in this webinar on Jenkins, but the strategy, the practices apply across all different technologies. Before we start, diving into the actual details, I will just set the stage in the first part of this webinar to the terms of DevOps, CI/CD, CT, the 3 Cs, if you like, and how they enable an efficient pipeline, an efficient DevOps software delivery chain. And then we'll start talking about strategies on how to scale, how to do testing in parallel correctly, how to utilize testing visibility. And most important, we'll see an amazing, I've seen it earlier, so an amazing demo that Johnny has created on a really how good looks like when you create a good, solid pipeline across different test automation suites, and how you can zoom into issues when they rise. So definitely recommend to stay throughout the webinar because there is a lot of great content that we have prepared. Q&A, while we'll have time at the end, feel free to chime in and ask any questions throughout the webinar. We'll do our best to address any questions during and also after this webinar. As mentioned, let's start with the key terms, just so everyone is on the same page as we are. And I will start with DevOps because I think that once you understand the value of DevOps, you understand why you want to have a good test automation strategy that you can trust. And DevOps, if you just focus on the first sentence in this slide, is a compound of development and operations, or a union of people, processes, and technologies, if you like, that are working together to continuously provide value to customers. And how you provide value to customers? When you ensure that your software works. It works at scale across different geographies, across different platforms, and so on and so forth. So to deliver value continuously, MVP, small chunks, and so on and so forth, but it needs to work and it needs to deliver value continuously. So that's, in a high level. And to do so, it takes a village, as mentioned. It takes the developers, the ops guys, the test engineers, the product team, the business, and everyone. To make the previous slide a reality, you have a good, solid pipeline. It's called the CI/CD. But the CI/CD, what it's missing here is the term of CT, which I will soon get to. So to have a good development pipeline, you need across each and every phase here to have a gate, to have a solid validation that gets you the confidence in which you can transition from one phase to the next. I'm not talking about waterfall, I'm talking still about DevOps, but even in DevOps and Agile, you do want to have these constant checks, constant feedback loops that are being sent back to the developers as early and as soon as possible. And that's, the concept of also shifting left and also shifting right, by the way. With that, the previous slide was just talking about some testing, but continuous testing is, in my mind, the glue that unites CI and CD. It's coming in between these terms, but it also comes in between the processes, ensuring that you are able to perform test automation that brings you value that you can trust, as this webinar title talks about, to obtain and identify business risks upon each code changes. Okay, that's continuous testing. Continuous testing does depend on test automation, robust test automation upon each and every gate, but it's more than just the test automation. It's also the process, it's the notion, it's the unification of different tools, technologies, personas, so you get the feedback correctly and in time. And if that's not enough, this is what one of my colleagues from this field of software test automation, Dan Ashby, is talking about. To do continuous testing and enable an efficient CI/CD, you need to be testing at each and every gate, at each and every phase in your development pipeline. In the planning, in the build acceptance testing, the build of the software, when you do build acceptance testing, also during the release and post the release in production. That's what you see here for the production monitoring. So basically, you need to be able to test in each and every moment on demand. And for that, again, you need something that you can trust. You need a robust and reliable test automation. Before I move to the challenges that we see in test automation, Johnny, any comment or feedback from what you see, today in the field around this continuous testing notion?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Eran. I do, on a day-to-day basis, work with a lot of prospect and customers, and my primary job is really to understand where they are in their automation journey. So not only the automation journey, but QA as general, like how are they managing, for example, different aspects of continuous testing throughout the different quality gates that they put in their pipeline. But yes, continued testing is definitely very, very important. I think all of the prospect I talk to, in one shape or form, they want to achieve continuous testing. And a lot of times they're on different, on a different bell curve in terms of where they are in that journey. Some might be just starting out, and some might be in the middle of it, and some might be improving their existing practice to have faster feedback, have quality gates embedded, not just functional testing, but also performance testing, accessibility testing, security testing, all sorts of testing embedded in their cycle. But absolutely agree. I think this is a forefront of a lot of our conversation that we have globally throughout small customers, big customers, enterprise customers. We're all trying to achieve the same thing, which is continuous testing in order to have quality applications that we're deploying to the market.
Awesome, Johnny. And I think that this makes a lot of sense. But, this is what I would say good looks like. That's what we want to aim when we are building a continuous testing CI/CD in DevOps. But unfortunately, and in today's reality, what we actually see is that there are a lot of gaps in the process of continuous testing that either slows down the test automation engineers, and by the way, test automation engineers can be the developers themselves. We'll soon get to that point as well. But there are a lot of challenges. Some of them are root causes of other challenges that we see here. For example, if you do not have the proper skill set within the squad, within the team, to automate inside the sprint the required features and functionalities, obviously you cannot march towards a more advanced automation scenarios creation. So one sometimes results in the other challenge. Or if you have a different siloed approach, you have a distributed team that is in some cases disconnected. And today's reality, when everyone is working from remote, It's by definition, I would say, a siloed digital approach. But still, when testing is done separately, you sometimes have a blind spot or some blind spots in the process, which either impacts your test automation understanding, understanding the feature, the functionality, what needs to be automated versus what's currently, unsupported or doesn't need to be even worked on inside a sprint, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of challenges that we see today that either impacts the automation coverage, the automation stability, the feedback loop, like you can see here, how much time you can spend to analyze the test results, whether they're coming from CI or just from the IDE that you are running your test within. The merging into the pipeline, merging the test into Jenkins, into your pipeline, also sometimes is either impossible because the teams are working in a different Jenkins environment, that the developers are working on a different one. So there are a lot of complexities here, and you need to be strategic around that. You need to have a common understanding, a full collaboration between developers, test automation engineers, business testers, product management, and product owners, so you get all these challenges checked and resolved. Otherwise, you are risking in escape defects to production. You are risking in getting some poor feedback from your end users. And by the way, if you are unable to automate inside a sprint, it means that you are creating a backlog of tasks that once you get ad hoc activities in the next sprint, either bugs from production or a market event that requires the developer's attention, sometimes the test automation that weren't capable to be implemented in the cycle are being pushed from one sprint to the next, and this creates a huge quality risk to the business. So I didn't touch all of these challenges, but obviously these are kind of fundamental challenges that we see day in and day out that are impacting the level of trust and reliability of test automation. And if you do not get this test automation trust earlier, you can obviously can't merge it into your pipeline. It's even not recommended, until you certified your test automation. It's really not smart to embed such test cases into your build acceptance testing, into Jenkins, because you will get all reds, upon each and every build. So you need to have some precondition certifications before you march forward. And if that's not go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, I think this is a great illustration of the common challenges that we hear from a lot of our customers and our prospect is really everyone is trying to march towards continuous testing. So everyone has the same goal. However, everyone has a different set of challenges when it comes to people, process, and technology. For example, a common problem and a common challenge that I hear a lot is how does, let's say, for example, a cloud lab or like a cloud vendor access an internal environment? So how do we access, let's say, QA environment, UAT environments, developer sandbox in order to get that pipeline up and running and scale it out to multiple devices and browsers at the same time? But this is a great slide. I think this hits home on a lot of the challenges that I personally hear through a lot of these meetings with my prospect and customers.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And Johnny, to your question on, the local environment testing, especially today when you're testing in the cloud and from remote, maybe during the demo we can touch on that as well, because that's definitely a challenge that impacts the automation. And, it actually relates to this challenge on setting up a good test environment, not just that it's stable and you can trust, but also a test environment that really mimics the end user conditions, the production data, and so on and so forth. So that's really a good point, and we'll probably address it during the demo later on. So if this slide and challenges aren't enough, we are also living in a digital continuous changing environment or reality. And in that case, I wouldn't mention each and every noise or disruption, but just to get to the point, foldable smartphones, fragmentation, progressive web growth and adoption, new automation frameworks like Flutter, Cypress, APKs in Android, app clips in iOS, okay? these things are constantly being introduced to the market by technology vendors, and we call them, and Johnny, actually, I like your term of market events. These market events have a huge implications and impact on what's happening to your test automation environment. Because, if an iOS 14 comes up, and it just came up, you need to support it. And just so you know, a lot of changes are happening in this framework or platform, which may break your Appium or XUI test scripts that are running daily via Jenkins, okay? So this maintenance needs to be baked into your processes, regardless, even if you made any change to your native or hybrid application, okay? And if you are trying to work with foldable smartphones on Android is the only one that currently is shipping foldable smartphones. We have seen that testing Android applications on foldable devices, and Perfecto does support that, you're starting to deal with a very complex automation, starting from accessibility and split view mode. And this, for you as an application developer, you haven't done any changes, right? You're just shipping your application to the Google Play, but then your end user needs to work with this app in parallel with other two apps that are, competing on resources and many other things. So the digital reality that continuously changes also poses a challenge or impact your test automation robustness and reliability, and this needs to be also top of mind for developers and product managers, just to make sure that whatever you are building stands in the test of time, and everything that changes in the market really is being taken under consideration in your plans.
Aran, I think you bring up a really, really good point. And I often hear this as a challenge with a lot of my customers, that when it comes to mobile testing, it's very different from, let's say, traditional desktop testing, that the landscape is changing all the time. We know that Apple, for example, will always release a new phone every year. Android will always release one, if not two, if not three different flagship phones within the year. And on top of that, there's OS changes. There's also changes regarding to the fragmentation of devices. And all of this adds additional complexity to really making sure that we're testing on the devices and the real end user condition that our customers are also faced with. So I think this illustrates not only what's happening right now, but we do see there is an accelerated change in the market, where right now we're going through exciting times that there's a lot of new innovation, things like the foldable phone you mentioned, and also various different application types that are being developed. So you mentioned also here the progressive web application, but also new development environments such as Flutter. Those are the things that we see continuing to fragment the market and continuing to make it a bit more difficult job for QA and automation engineers to ensure a quality development and a release cycle.
Yeah, and this is why, it needs to be part of, I would say, even a buffer that you take upon, because these are current, at least over the past few years, these changes are recurring changes upon each and every month on an annual basis. We know that June is the time when a new iOS will be released. September or the fall is when the new iOS and new Android GA are going to be released. February, March is when the new set of Samsung and other flagship smartphones are being released. So there are kind of recurring milestones in the year that product managers and developers should put in their calendars, so they are keeping an eye on what's going on and whether it impacts any of their assets and continuous testing activities. So that's really something that we see almost on a daily basis.
Right. And Aran, I know you see this on a daily basis when we interact with our customers, but what we often find is that the landscape is shifting a lot faster than how our customers can react, especially when it comes to quality assurance. I think we see quite a few different personas being developed in terms of like what their capabilities are and also what their responsibilities are. So maybe, Aran, you can help us understand a little bit more what we often see in the market, and how do we address the common challenge of reaching continuous testing through various frameworks and various personas?
That's a great point, and I think that's a kind of a fundamental point in a successful continuous testing strategy, which brings us to this part in the webinar when we try to be more strategic around how our decision-making process. So what we see, again, that's what I see, and I've been in this space for over 20 years now. So we see three main personas that are kind of running the show and touching the continuous testing activities. It can be the unit testing, the functional testing, and as Johnny mentioned, performance, accessibility, security, API testing. It all comes down to these three different individuals or personas. Sometimes there can be multiple of them, of course. So we're talking about the business testers, the SDETs, and the software developers. So these three different personas vary by their objectives, their job that needs to be done, the time frame that they have to accomplish the job. Obviously, developers have a much shorter timeline to invest in test automation compared to SDET, that's mostly what they are tasked to do. And business testers have a unique job as well in the pipeline, but they have also a unique challenge, and we're going to talk about it just now in the slide. So what I've tried to come up here with the help of Johnny is to map the different personas based on the job that needs to be done, the technology, and the objective that they have in front of them. Starting with the SDETs, okay? The SDETs, the test automation engineers, sometimes they have their own and unique test automation framework that they have built either on top of Selenium or WebDriver IO or something that they built from scratch. But these guys know how to write code either in Java or other languages. And they would typically use frameworks for end-to-end testing, functional end-to-end testing, such as Appium for mobile and Selenium for cross-browser testing. These guys care about test automation coverage. Okay, they care about making sure that all the sophisticated end-to-end scenarios from A to Z are covered and automated to the maximum percentage possible in a given amount of time, hopefully inside the sprint, okay? In parallel, and in the same team, they have the business testers. Business testers, unfortunately, are not the ones that are good at writing code in Java, JavaScript, C#. They are not developers. They are good at QA. They are good at exploratory testing. They see the framework. They see the market. They think like the end users, but they are not skilled to develop test automation in a language like Java and so forth. This is why typically these guys would try and focus more on Cucumber, BDD. Perfecto is owning the framework called Quantum, that is a BDD implementation for web and for mobile. Underneath, it does need the support for this SDETs guy for writing step definition, but they are trying to move from manual to automation to put all their exploratory unique use cases inside the pipeline so their feedback is being heard and they are impacting the quality of the release. The final persona, as mentioned in the previous slide, is the developer. And I mentioned earlier, the developer cares about speed, execution speed, and fast feedback. It's all about the speed here. And this is, and obviously they have the skill set to write code in different languages, but they want to do it in an environment that is quite convenient for them. Typically, it will be from within the IDE that they are using, whether it's Android Studio or XCUI Test or IntelliJ. But these guys will typically go with Espresso, XCUI Test, or Cypress because these frameworks does not require a massive setup of the test environment. It runs within the browser or within the mobile device from the IDE. So this is exactly what matches these guys' objective: acceleration of feedback, execution speed, and moving to the next ticket, to the next Jira activity, or to the next defect that they want to resolve. Obviously, when you combine all of these three, if you do it right, and if you are strategic around that, and you are matching the technology to the process, to the objectives, you also want to make sure that the robustness is not, and the reliability is not being harmed. Obviously, with this kind of frameworks, especially because the developer have the skill set and the business testers are writing in a language which is plain English, the robustness of the test is going to be typically higher than the traditional Selenium and Appium that we keep hearing about their flakiness. And oh, by the way, this is also a matter of skill set and good coding practices that can make or move this bubble a bit towards the right with regards to robustness. But in today's reality, we do see a challenge in reliability of test results. And by the way, in the demo, Johnny is going to show us a bit about what we talk about from a reporting standpoint, what we see from a flakiness and test reliability perspective within Jenkins, outside of Jenkins, both.
Mm-hmm.
Any comment on this?
You have a great slide. I think if we navigate to slide 13,
Yep.
Eran, you did a really good job of mapping this out, where the frameworks are and which personas they would fit really well in. So Eran, we can navigate to slide 13, and I think in this graph we documented like which framework. So we talked about the developer-led framework, we talked about the SDED-led framework, and we also talked about the persona where it's geared more towards a business tester. So as we can see in this slide, and this is a really good visual, Eran, thanks to for you for creating this, because when we talk to a lot of prospects, they really don't know where to start. If you're on the start of an automation journey, what we also and often hear is really, where do I start? Like, what framework do I choose? And Eran, I think to your point, you mentioned about a lot of these frameworks, a lot of these technology. And what we do see is that when we understand exactly where our customers are in their people, process, technology journey, we're able to help them map out which framework would we recommend for their shop. So for example, if let's say they are, let's say a team of a lot of SDETs, they're comfortable with Java and JavaScript, and their focus is in, let's say, a native application, then we can see that either like an Appium-based framework or like an Espresso XCUI-based framework would be applicable for what they are. Or if I hear something like, let's say we have a lot of business testers and we don't have, let's say, a lot of developers in software development, engineers contributing to automation, you can see there's also a lot of these codeless frameworks which are available for them when it comes to coming up with quality gates and automating a lot of their regression test cases.
Awesome. I'm just making sure you're seeing slide 13, right? You're seeing.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I think that once you are again strategic about that, you're definitely in a good place to start building, your continuous testing activities and merge whatever makes sense to the pipeline. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next phase of this webinar. Up until the demo, we're going to talk about strategy for scaling the continuous testing in DevOps through the pipeline itself. And to do so, you need to, again, everyone is talking about shift left and getting the fast feedback, but to do so, you need not just the frameworks that I talked about earlier to match the right personas, you also need to be on top of things. You need to have the good visibility. This is called building quality by testing early. You need to have visibility into the features, into the story points, to have access to the Jira design activities, the product requirements earlier, so you can start building testing inside the cycle. If you are unable to implement the test cases, the automation, and run it inside the cycle, this is A, not a continuous testing, and B, there is no way for you to release with confidence to production. So this needs to be going on in parallel. The three personas that were mentioned in previous slide, as the business tester and developers, really needs to break all the silos. Even today in the remote reality, they need to have a solid communication layer, transparent one that talks about what is supported, what are the product requirements, what is the timeline. They need to provide each other access to the frameworks, to the environments, to the data that is going to be used to build the test cases and anything that can support the test creation. But this is, again, not enough. We are living in a very complex and complicated reality, especially in the digital landscape. So having a structured way of working is fine, but also looking at what to automate from a strategic point of view. This is one of the slides that my client, a large enterprise bank, is using for his banking application. So when he's thinking about test automation strategy, he's thinking about the skill set, which matches, by the way, the previous slides talking about the different personas and matching the technology to their skill set. What is in the scope of the sprint to automate, and I will soon touch on that because that's a key for success. What are the objectives? What are we trying to get out of the test automation investment? I'm not just talking about ROI. I'm talking about value, and value is a different term than ROI. Value is really something that you can realize and you can see. ROI is mostly kind of a money-related term, and it's sometimes, okay, you saved a ton of money by automating, but you didn't really resolve the quality issues. You didn't eliminate the business risks as continuous testing really defines. So I will talk here about objectives and values to be obtained from test automation. Framework and tools connect to the technical skill set. The environments that needs to be set up and maintained are also important, and schedule is the $1 million bullet here. How much time I have per each individual or persona to get the job done, because this will also give us the prioritization play here to understand which tests I'm automating, which are more important than others. And if you look at this nice table, which is quite simple, everyone and anyone can create such. So if you look at different scenarios that you see in a banking application day in and day out, right? You have the login scenarios, the option to pay a bill, to transfer funds between banks, disclosures, alerts, whatever, right? And you can see here the check marks, and each organization might find a specific scenario based on usage and business needs more important than the other. But in this case, where you see the check marks, this is what is the trade-off. You see that account nicknames obviously are less important. Spend analyzer is probably not being utilized, so it just has a single check mark. But you can see the 3 and 4 check marks, or 2 and 3 check marks, which really gives you the direction. Okay, definitely the login scenario is a must for me to automate. I know it's straightforward, but it gives you a framework to look at what needs to be automated, what needs to happen inside the cycle. And I'm not saying that you don't need to automate nicknames. Maybe you do, but this can be as a nice to have in your backlog, as a kind of post-sprint thing to do. It's not going to be the end of the world. But the top scenarios that are impacting your customers and are mostly being used, these are the ones that needs to be paid attention to. The next consideration, if you defined the personas, the technologies, the scenarios that needs to be automated, this is when we are talking about parallel testing, okay? Parallel testing is key for increasing coverage, to get the execution speed to the highest level, and to obtain fast feedback, okay? Parallel testing is not like a term called like we use shift left. It has a meaning. You do parallel testing for a reason, and you invest in having a solid test automation that you can trust running in parallel upon each code change because of these 3 benefits, okay? This should be your objective. This should be your goals behind parallel testing. It's not just to get the job done faster. It's also to put more coverage into the cycle, to get feedback much faster to the developers so you can meet these strict deadlines. And we'll soon see in the demo how you do it. Go ahead, Johnny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's great when you flip over to slide 17. Here's an illustration of a parallel test and a code snippet of how we can set this up. I think you're right to your point. Yeah, absolutely to your point. You can see that here's an example. And parallel testing often is one thing I hear a lot. So when I have these meetings and I talk to my prospects, this is really often very high in their success criteria because they understand the need for faster feedback loop. So one of the key requirements that we see is how does, let's say, a vendor, Perfecto per se, enable parallel testing in order for them to achieve a faster feedback loop. Especially when we think about a pipeline, really the pipeline and the quality gates that we embed in pipeline is really designed so that we can give developers a thumbs up or a thumbs down when it comes to, let's say, a new build, an APK, an IPA, or like a website that they're pushing.
Yeah, and I think, Johnny, to your point, you are going to show us something quite impressive in just a few minutes that emphasizes not just the importance, but also the how to look at parallel testing and what's the benefits, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We're happy to showcase a new feature that we added. It's a plugin that we've uploaded to Jenkins recently, and we'll talk about that in a second. But essentially, we see a lot of our customers, and a lot of the customers are struggling to get started. So one of the key challenges they have is really how do they leverage a cloud vendor but point towards their internal environment and run these tests in QA and UAT environments. But before that, I think on this slide, Eran, I'd like to spend a few minutes on this because I think there's a lot of logos in this, and really what we want to showcase here is Perfecto. We noticed that, and we understand that a lot of prospects that we talk to, they have an existing tool set that they're using, or they have existing technologies that they're using. So what are the things that Perfecto are doing? And Eran, I know you have the product manager hat as well. So there's quite a few different logos in here, but Eran, can you help us understand a little bit more of how we're architect, how Perfecto is architect, and how do we play well with these various tools in the market?
Sure, Johnny. And I deliberately placed these logos in an really kind of agnostic order because, that's the landscape. And if I'm going to do this slide like in 3 months from today, you might see another few lines here, or some lines will be gone, because we are living in a very fragile, dynamic environment, reality, where so many open source frameworks are being introduced day in and day out to solve a specific challenge. And what we are seeing throughout our customer base globally is that no single client or customer has a single technology that solves these end-to-end continuous testing requirements. It's always a match of or a bunch of technologies, starting from the build process up until the release activities or stages that really gets the job done. I will give you an example, Johnny. So one of our clients is using, in his build early processes, instead of Jenkins, is using Bitrise, or he's using TeamCity. Okay, that's kind of his CI tool. We needed to support that, right? We cannot interfere or break the flow of continuous testing. Perfecto is considered a continuous testing platform. It means that we want to be as open and integrated, so we are not disrupting the process. We are kind of playing into the process. So whatever these guys will use Bitrise early in the process, and then they will need to do functional testing with maybe Cucumber or Quantum by Perfecto, and they need to support visual testing through Apply tools from within an IntelliJ IDE towards releasing to production and doing performance testing with Neotis, okay, for the now load and performance testing activities. We will accompany these guys from A to Z throughout the different technologies. But I think that this example just gives you the notion of how many technologies are being involved to release a single, if you just look at a mobile application today, and Johnny, you're doing it day in and day out, right? If you're building a native mobile application that is, let's say, just Android, you're developing it through the Android Studio IDE, you're building it and releasing maybe through the Jenkins CI, you're doing build acceptance testing with Selenium, or maybe you're using Perfecto with Tricentis to do the functional test automation, and you're using Perfecto Cloud with reporting and analysis and the dashboards and everything that is relevant there, and so on and so forth, right? So it's not a single logo here that really gets you from one point to the end, towards the end. It's a combination, and the strategy or the success criteria here is to select the right logos, the right open source frameworks, the right technologies. Sometimes they will be off-the-shelf product. It makes sense as well. But when you combine all of them into a single strategy, this is when you are successful in sustaining a good continuous testing strategy. Make sense, Johnny?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Aran, for going through these various logos. And personally, I've witnessed this a lot, and more increasingly, more and more so, as we talk to our customers, we find out that we're not the only tool that they're using. So it's a very important, and I think, Aran, you pointed out a really good point. Perfecto is designed to be open and integrated. And what that really means is that we're designed so that we can work with open source tools and proprietary tools alike, but also we're able to integrate with various pipeline strategies. So I think that brings us to the next part of the demo. What we really want to showcase is we have a new plugin which we push to the Jenkins plugin server, which is a very easy way to integrate with your pipeline and also to test on QA and lower environments. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a quick demo to highlight this plugin. And let me take a hold of the screen.
Yeah. I will let you know once I can see it.
Okay. All right. Let me know if you can see my Jenkins local server.
Let me just see. Second, I can still. 1 second, I wait. Yeah, now I can see it. Go ahead, Johnny.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. So I do want to highlight this new, very exciting plugin. So part of what we're doing right here with Perfecto is we want to make it easier for new customers to onboard. And we want to make it a seamless process. So a lot of our customers are on Jenkins, that are using Jenkins as their CI server, their CI/CD pipeline. And in here, I have a very simple plugin which I want to illustrate. So when I click into this job, you see that we have published a very exciting plugin which allows us to leverage what we call a reverse proxy Perfecto Connect tunnel in order to connect to lower environments. And Aran, I know you were a part of the process in submitting the plugin to the App Store. And can you help us understand a little bit more of what we went through in order to submit this? Especially, I know we spent a lot of time talking about security when it comes to submitting a secure plugin where everyone can download and utilize.
Totally, Johnny. Yeah. So when we started reviving our previous Jenkins plugin, we started engaging with the Jenkins community. And what we have learned is that they've made some very unique and strict changes to the process of submitting and getting a new plugin for Jenkins approved. And what we have learned is that you need to undergo a very long process of security audits to make sure that you are not exposing any credentials like you see here on the screen with that Johnny is showing. You see this, it's all fully obfuscated. You are not able to see not the cloud URL, not the security token, not your credentials. Nothing is allowed. No, I would say static or hard-coded strings are allowed to be part of the Jenkins plugin, especially when you're doing it in the cloud and you're running with specific environment, like in this case, Perfecto Connect gets you access to the backend and the local services. This needs to be highly secured, so the client is not exposing any sensitive data to the world. And it took us longer than we expected, but we are happy that we got the blessing and the green light from the Jenkins community with the new and fresh plugin that we've made available just two or 3 months ago. And this is ready for everyone. You can go to the Jenkins store, download the plugin. It's very easy to configure, very easy to install, but also very secure.
Thanks, Aran. We're excited to present this. And what does this Perfecto plugin really do? And I'll show you in a second what this reverse proxy we call the Perfecto Connect would allow you to achieve. So as part of this, as I go in here, when I click on the Build Now button, essentially the plugin will establish a tunnel for you. So you see that, and I hop over the console log. You can see it's pointing towards a local executable, which I downloaded on my machine. And through this, again, very secure command line, I'm pointing towards the cloud and also a secure token, which I've obfuscated. Once this is complete, what you will get is a tunnel ID, and we can pass that tunnel ID along to a device or devices or web browsers in the cloud when we're using Perfecto. Now you see that we have the tunnel ID, which ends in 143. And if I hop over here to my Perfecto lab, what you should be able to see is if I click on this over here, you see that this tunnel is now available for use. And to illustrate a very simple point, right now locally I'm able to access my router. So if I go into 192.168.0.1, I'm able to access my console, my router on my local machine. However, the same URL is not accessible when I go into a device right now. Okay, so when I click on this, you see that it doesn't load. What the Perfecto Connect allows us to do is, if I clear this device, close it up, and I'm going to do the same thing again, but this time I'm going to leverage this tunnel that ends over here. I'm going to use the tunnel. It's going to establish the tunnel. So from this point onwards, any device that I have, let's say I pick up this over here, you see that this device will be able to access this URL over here, which is only accessible through my local machine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to clip this, copy, and I paste it in this device, and we can see in a second we're able to access this internal router, which is only accessible through my local machine. We'll copy the address, we'll paste it, and you can see that we're able to detect my router, and we're able to access the login page. It's a very powerful reverse proxy connection. In summary, what this will allow you to do is really to access your QA environment and lower environments. So through this plugin that we have, you can embed this as part of your process. And if we can look at an end-to-end flow, here's what we really want to achieve. We have a job, we have a simple plugin where you first of all establish the tunnel, so now we can access your local machine. After that is complete, we want to spin up either a smoke test, a sanity test, or like a regression test, where we can leverage this tunnel and run on multiple devices at the same time your regression or your smoke test suite. Now here's an example. I'm going to kick off my regression test. In this case, I'm actually leveraging Espresso as the underlying framework. And again, it's going to go through a rigorous process. Through a plugin that we have, we're going to upload the APK onto Perfecto devices. And at the same time, if I navigate over to the live stream view, you see that this test is being started already and is actually kicking off in parallel across multiple devices at the same time. So now my simple calculator app, which I've uploaded to various devices, in fact, I've uploaded to 16 devices in parallel. They're running regression on 16 devices in parallel at the same time. And through this live stream view, you're able to visualize the output of that execution. We'll give it a second for it to complete, but as this is kicking off, you can see it's also being logged in Jenkins. Now, the last thing I want to show you is once this is complete, we want to give you the feedback because we understand that running the test is one thing, but visualizing the output and making sense of it is also very important. So you can see that as the test is running, I've also navigated over to our CI dashboard view. And what this is that in Perfecto, any test that you executed, whether it's a manual test case, an automated test case, through, let's say, Selenium, Appium, Codeless, Espresso, XCUI, you name it, various different framework executed through, let's say, a Jenkins server, were able to output the reports in the CI dashboard view. Now, this is very powerful because we can see that as this job, which is tied to build number 10, is complete, we can tie this into this build over here that we see in Jenkins. And this will not only output you what is the status of build number 10, but also the historic perspective as well. So what happened in build number 9, 8, etc., etc. And what this allows you to do is really, for every single person on your team, whether it's your product managers, your developers, your QA, imagine everyone looking at the same single dashboard where it contains every single test case from, let's say, smoke tests on your master branch to your sanity build every 2 hours, or even your nightly regression. It's all accessible through the same dashboard. Now, what's really powerful about this is not only can everyone see what's happening with your builds, but you can also drill down into exactly what's happening. Now you see in here I have some failing tests and some passing tests. But what I can do is that by clicking on the heat map view, I'm able to separate out on which tests they're failing and which tests they're passing. Now to give you an example, I will access this on the previous build. So in build number 9, I'm going to access the heat map. And I'm going to filter out, let's say, what happened in the last 24 hours. And now you can see build number 10, 38 failing and 22 passing. So it seems like it's a flaky build, but when I do drill down into which tests are passing and failing, it clearly highlights for you these 2 tests that I have are failing on every single device. Whereas these 2 tests that I have, they're only failing on certain devices. Now, as you can see, this is really powerful. You can customize your dashboard, but what this will illustrate for you is really when you do have an issue, you can quickly, through the heat map view, showcase what's failing, what's passing, and also you can click into these heat maps, individual test cases, and this will bring you to why they're failing as well. And to summarize all of this, really between the heat map view, the dashboard view, and the report library, we give you all the visuals possible for you to easily pass that information along to our team members and to establish a faster feedback loop so that your developers can take a look at this, open up the same device where it's been failing it on, and directly debug and troubleshoot from those devices.
That's excellent. This is excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Johnny, for showing this demo. And I think that if we want to summarize what you have just presented, we are talking about a solid, reliable pipeline running test automation that you can trust. You have shown us 16 different devices running a single test from within Jenkins across different phases, regression, unit, and so forth. Some of them are also connected to a Perfecto Connect with local environment being set up. So if you want to get a chance or try the new plugin that Johnny just showed you, you can go to the plugins.jenkins.io/Perfecto and download it, or simply from your Jenkins installation, you can download the plugin and configure it. It's highly secured. It has support for Perfecto Connect. It's fully compliant with the new and most rigorous Jenkins Foundation requirements, and it allows you to run at scale in the cloud on mobile or desktop web applications. With that, I want, Johnny, if you want to spend just a moment on the next 2 slides. You have shown us the pipeline, but this is taken from one of your existing clients. What is the important thing that we can get out of this pipeline example?
Absolutely. If we go on to the next slide, I think we have a very nice illustration. So this is one of the customers I've been working with for quite a few years, and I'm happy to work with them because I was involved in the initial phase. So for this customer, what we've done is that we were engaged, I believe, in 2014. And at that time, we have very little automation. We don't have a pipeline strategy, and we're just starting off with our automation journey. But throughout the years, what we do see is that they eventually matured through the works with Perfecto and also their own maturity. We're able to establish a solid pipeline foundation. So for them, we're at a phase where, first of all, we have a nightly regression established. And the next step in their evolution is really how do we shift left and how do we embed more quality gates earlier in the cycle by introducing 2 things. First of all, we want to run 1-hour feedback window. So every noon, when the developers are going for lunch, they're going to push a build, they're going to compile an APK and IPA. And we want within that 1-hour feedback window to run a sanity build that covers all the important critical use cases. And by the time they're back from their lunch break, they're able to have actionable feedback. Now, the second thing we want to establish is also on top of that, we have multiple developers working in different time zones. And at any one time, there are up to 7 concurrent pull requests a day. So you can imagine there's quite a few different local feature branches, and there's quite a few different developers merging to dev branch at various points in time. So what we establish here, and what we're trying to target is, for every single pull request, we should run a smoke test. And in that smoke test, there should be a 5-hour feedback window In this case, it's a 10-hour feedback window for this client. And we want to ensure that within that 10-minute feedback window, we have the go, no go of, yes, it's good. You can push it and promote it to another branch. Or, you've broken something minor and you shouldn't submit it because there's something wrong with the build. But as you can see, this is all connected through Jenkins server. And part of the process is really mapping out different quality gates and what are the responsibility of those quality gates. Now here's another example if we flip to the next slide. Now, a different visual, but essentially telling the same story. So for this customer, what we're trying to do is we're trying to segregate the responsibility of different quality gates. So you can see on top, first of all, there's 4 different quality gates. There's a local unit test, there's an acceptance test on every pull request, the integrated test, which is also a scheduled build 4 times a day, and a full regression nightly. But as you can see, if you look in the bottom, this is kind of what we call a coverage cube, where on the x-axis is a number of platforms of devices. So it could be a desktop platform, it could be your Android devices, it could be your iOS devices. And on the y-axis are the number of test cases you're executing. So here's a strategy that we work with this customer. And what we found was that for the local dev testing and the acceptance testing, really the responsibility and the target of these quality gates is to get fast feedback loop. Whereas if we start going into these integrated test environment and full regression environment, what we're really after is we're after coverage. So we're after all of those extended use cases where it only runs on, let's say, real end user condition and your top 15 to 24 devices. And in this case, this customer has various geography that we have to deploy the app on. So we have to target the top 32 devices across 6 different geographies in order to capture and to make sure there's no defects leak into production.
Awesome. I think that, Johnny, with the demo and the 2 slides that shows actually 2 different strategies of maintaining a solid pipeline that has different coverage constraints across the different phases, this is the way to go. For that, you obviously need to have a good certified test automation that you can reliably execute prior to embedding it into Jenkins. If you have any issues, obviously, with the dashboard, like Johnny showed you in the demo, the CI dashboard here, you can see what's blocking you within the Jenkins pipeline, what is spiking up and taking you too long. But obviously, these are some examples and tools that you can use and embed into your process so you can build automation that works and you can trust. To wrap up this webinar, I just want to say one word, and I think that Johnny showed it also in the email, but I just want to emphasize the point of the power of test data analysis. When you execute at scale continuously, when you run it on different platforms, Johnny showed you a demo of running it across 16 different devices, you need to pay attention to the details. If you see a test scenario that fails 2 times or 3 times in a row, like Johnny in his demo showed you 2 scripts, 2 scenarios that constantly are failing, these test cases must be excluded. They cannot longer be part of your CI/CD pipeline. You need to exclude them, debug them, and only then return them back to the execution flow. The fact that you are carrying this weight from one release to the next of flaky test cases, buggy and noisy activities like pop-up handling that is not properly fixed in your test scenarios, elements not found, utilization of devices, you are really injecting a lot of noise and reducing the value from your pipeline. So you need to pay attention into the test reports, test data analysis, so you can make sense out of the data and move continuously towards the next phase. If you want to be also successful, these are just a few gathered metrics for you to measure how much time and how much do you automate across the different test automation scenarios, how much time it takes you to create and execute a test. All of these metrics, I won't go into each and every one of them, but this is kind of a takeaway from the webinar, set of metrics that you can look at, define, design, decide what you want to take home and maintain, because this is, what you cannot measure what you act upon something that you do not see. So get all these measures in place, see what is holding you back, what is blocking your CI/CD pipeline, which test automations are too lengthy or unreliable, and act on them. You will see an amazing outcome when you act upon solid strategies as we have presented in this webinar, and when you measure continuously the efficiency of your pipeline, you will see that you are becoming more and more successful, and you are reducing the overall software development cost of development, maintenance, and execution. With that, before we wrap up, and I know that we are just close to the end, I think that it's clear what are the 4 pillars for success, and these are having a unified solution that serves all the different personas within the DevOps pipeline, from the creation through execution, the lab that gives you the environment, the scale, and the management of all the artifacts, through the analysis that gives you the fast feedback, the root cause analysis, and the value realization from all the investments that you are doing earlier in the pipeline. So these are the 4 pillars that Perfecto believes are critical to your success. And with the short time that we have left, I'm sorry that we ran just a bit over. Shelby, do we have time for at least 1 or 2 questions?
Sure, yeah, let's kick it off. The first question is, what should I look for in a Jenkins test report, either regression or other jobs?
That's a good question, and I think that Johnny showed you a few of the things. So what you should look at the Jenkins test reports are a few things. A, obviously the time, the duration of a build, and if it's spiking up or down between the different execution, the different builds. Second, you want to see the red marks, which failures and which noise is being added or continuously being shown in the pipeline from one build execution to the next. And 3, you want to acknowledge gaps in your execution, in your regression. Johnny was showing you an example of a rigorous regression suite that is running within Jenkins, but regression is not good up until, it's good up until a certain level. It needs to be maintained. So ensuring that you have the tagging and everything else that can allow you to understand if you are lacking coverage, either platforms or test scenarios in your regression suite. It's also something that you need to keep in mind just so you continuously get value from your build acceptance testing.
All right, great. The last question that we'll have time for is, are there any recommended practices on which tests should be included in a Jenkins test execution?
Great. So I think that I touched just briefly that point in the webinar. Obviously, you want to have a solid certification process. In the strategy slide that I showed, which tests you need to automate. So A, you obviously want to make sure that you're automating what's important. B, not everything that you automate needs to be part of your CI/CD or your Jenkins build acceptance or regression suite. You need to be very careful in what you're including in Jenkins. This needs to be the highest value, the highest performing, and the most valuable test cases that historically have shown consistency, value of finding defects, and coverage. These are some of the guidelines that you want to keep in mind. And again, this will vary between different applications, different environments, and also, again, the environment conditions here are also critical to be part of the Jenkins test suite. To the guy that asked the question, we can obviously take it offline and dive much deeper into the details of how to strategize around that, but these are just few high-level points to keep in mind.
Just one added point there. I know we're running short of time, but great that you brought up the strategy, especially, for example, I think you had a banking customer example over there. Mm-hmm. And what we do often see is, for example, biometric login is a very, very critical step. And check capture is also a very, very critical flow. And those are the things that we often see that show up in the App Store. If it's working, it's great. But if it's not working, people will complain about that. So incorporating those use cases as part of, let's say, your Jenkins pipeline are critical in this example for a banking customer. Definitely. Keeping an eye on the App Store, on your most important use cases and flows within the app are definitely considered that you want to make as a decision-making process for what's coming and being automated in first point, but also what's then being embedded into your CI/CD activities.
So with that, I would like to thank you, Johnny, for all the effort and for joining me in this webinar. I do hope that anytime, Johnny, and I do hope that the audience found it valuable and insightful. And with that, Johnny, again, thank you, and we'll see you all in the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.